Di Maria, Lionel Messi, Messi's hitting! Oh! That's what they came for!
This could be the most dramatic story of the season. It's Torres to give Chelsea a place in the Champions League final.
I mean, Oliver Glasner's got Palace going at the moment. But yeah, it's just a situation of now, do we really want to chase the top four, or do we want to try and stop our arch enemies from claiming the title in their hands,
It's a tough one because you got that situation where Champions League football, and then you get to judge Ange Postecoglou on a good season and what he's been able to bring into Spurs for the year, or it's whether you contribute towards your arch rivals winning the league and supporting them in a way. It's a catch-22 situation and a tough time to be a Spurs fan as always.
Absolutely, it's never easy being a Spurs fan. I mean, it made me laugh because I can't remember word for word for his quote in his press conference yesterday with Ange Postecoglou saying, "Oh, 99% of Spurs fans on social media will probably want a City win." But he said something about cancelling or whatever, and I was thinking, blimey, I've needed cancelling all my life being a Spurs fan.
It definitely has been, mate. It's a tough roller coaster when you're not even a Spurs fan. Considering how many managers you've gone through, and in the last few years, I look at it and I go, right, you've had Antonio Conte, serial winner, you've had Jose Mourinho, serial winner, you've had Nuno, who is playing a good brand of football and was up there before, going out to Saudi, being sacked, and then coming back, and things aren't going rosy well at Forest at the moment, and then you've gone for Ange Postecoglou, which is a serial winner from Asian perspective and what he's done in Australia. So, it's definitely up and down in terms of those managers. But, for you as a Spurs fan, having appointed Postecoglou, would you say you've had a big improvement since Conte, since Mourinho?
I think there has been an improvement. I mean, a lot of fans have criticised over the last couple of months when our form's just not been for heights it was at the first half of the season. But realistically, I mean, we've also lost Harry Kane. That was our top goal scorer for the club's history, really. That was, yeah. It's going to be hard to replace someone of that ilk. So Sonny's come in and played up front, and with Ange, I think he's been a breath of fresh air as well. I think what I've learned since supporting Spurs is that big names with Tottenham or big reputations, it doesn't tend to go well, i.e. with Conte, with Mourinho, even with Andre Villas-Boas when he was appointed at Spurs. There was a lot of talk about him being the next best thing, and it just didn't work out in the end. So I think with the likes of Postecoglou, that's its first chance in the Premiership. We had Pochettino that come from Southampton. He knew what the Premiership entailed, but because the expectation wasn't, though they want to win games and they want to win trophies, it's a different mannerism in their approach to it. Unlike Conte and Mourinho, that are, as you say, serial winners, they're demanding every week.
I think it's definitely, he brings a level of stability, which I think he's got that good aura about him, good charisma. I think that's the stability that Spurs need just for the next few years, especially if they're looking to replace, Harry Kane, the top goal scorer of England, scored, so many goals for Spurs and almost broke the Premier League record, which is still an achievement which he can do in the future if he comes back to the Premier League. So to, move Son into his position, but to lose the support between Son and Kane is a big factor in that. But I think they just need to stick with Postecoglou for 2-3 years, just keep qualifying for Champions League football, trying to push for the domestic cups and try and just put in at least a challenge for the Premier League table. Because you look at it now, you've got Arsenal are up there performing, City are up there performing. I know there's questions over Guardiola in the future whether he'll stay. You've got Liverpool, they're going to be a question mark now for the next season with Arne Slot coming in. Chelsea are trying to rebuild and come back. Villa are up there competing. You've got Newcastle competing. So I think it's a very tough position to be in, but as long as they're up and around it, I think that's the best sort of ambition to have at the moment.
I totally agree. I think this is it. Is if you compare to, again, I was reading. I'm one for that likes reading statistics,
Mm.
and for one that was represented recently is that Ange in his first season with us has achieved the 65 plus points mark or something, and Arteta was below that, and so was Guardiola. So you could say that there is good signs there. It's a good foundation to build on. Um, but I think, yeah, Champions League football is what you know we keep pushing for, but we just need to, I suppose, now go on to that next step. And Andrew's got to be given the resources to do that, really, because if you want to compete with the likes of Liverpool and City for titles, even with Arne Slot coming in, Liverpool's still going to be strong.
Mm.
Um, and it's now with Arsenal being a force as well, with how Arteta's built that Arsenal side. It's I have to say it's credit where it's due. It's absolutely fantastic how he's transformed that Arsenal side that was very depleted, if you like. I'm trying to think who it was at Arsenal now before Arteta.
Unai Emery. It was Freddie Youngberg, but before him, it was
That's
Unai
it.
Emery.
Unai Emery. I mean, even Unai Emery got harshly treated and sacked, really, given the grand scheme of things. But it's showing what Emery can do, what he's done at Villa. Um, and yeah, I just feel that, yeah, we've got to give Ange that chance. We have got to give him that chance. And I just hope that Daniel Levy, because he's got that sacking culture, if you like, that he's just a bit, he gives that patience. I mean, I think Ange signed a 3.5 year deal, 4 year deal, maybe when he joined Spurs, which is a long term appointment, you could say, but it's got to continue on from them 3 4 years. Even if he does move on, our ethos as a club, our um, standard of football has got to remain in that vein. It can't change again from like how it was with Conte and Mourinho because it really just didn't stand out. It wasn't Spurs football how you know it as open, expansive football. I've said this in terms, I know it sounds daft, but I've said it in terms of coaching. I'd rather trying to lose a game 5-4 and go for it than lose 4-0 and, there's been nothing to show for it.
Mm. I get you completely in terms of that. It shows that you're in a game. You got that resilience. You're fighting towards it. You got that heart, that desire. You've put 4 goals against them. You might have conceded 5 at the end of the day, but it's better than having a 4-0 thrashing and not being in the game or getting anything back. And it also shows opportunities that players can build upon for scoring across the season. So, I'm a big Levy fan, to be honest. I think he's a fantastic operator, fantastic chairman. The stadium always gets talked about in terms of the structure that you've got, especially for the club. The finances are there, the stability. He's brought in good managers. He shows he can bring in players. He's pragmatic. They got a fantastic academy. They're up there challenging for at least European football, and they're up in the top 10 consistently. And now, if not the top 7, and then they're pushing for the top 5, which has shown massive progress over the years. But a lot of people criticize him. I think that's because he doesn't, spend as big as the other operators out there. But I think in terms of what he's doing, if you look at then other clubs within that mix, you got Villa now are up there. You got Newcastle being pragmatic in the way they spend. You got West Ham, which are looking to transition away from Moyes now into Lopetegui. So they're trying to push a bit more. And when you got these clubs and Spurs are still there competing, but not spending the massive money, unless they got billions of pounds to do it, like the cities have been doing. Liverpool are slightly different in terms of their structure. And again, it's going to be, question marks over how next season looks in terms of whether they bring Michael Edwards in and how this looks around it. Then you got United in their rebuild. Then you got Chelsea. I think for Levy to operate the way he is, I think he's the absolute perfect man in terms of that approach. And I think we could utilize someone like him at Chelsea, for example, just to give us a little bit of stability and be pragmatic about who we sign, especially around all the players we currently have.
Oh, absolutely. I think there is examples out there. I mean, I think as well, there was that window when we gone through the situation that we got that Gareth Bale money. And we signed for likes of Nacer Chadley, Stromboli, Ericsson, Capu. The only one that really stood out of that lot really was Ericsson, you know. But I think that was again maybe a pressure thing of that. Maybe it was a fan pressure where they was going banging on to Levy saying, "Well, you got this X amount of money for Bale. We need to start investing into the team now." Um, And yeah, don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against him as an owner. I think, as you say, it could be a situation where, you know, I mean, he's brought us that new stadium as well. He's brought us excellent training facilities within football club academy, youth academy, as you say. I don't have, yeah, there is fans that saying, "Oh, Levy out," and that. I'm not really a Levy out. Um, but I do think that it would be just nice to, if we could have at least one marquee signing, that could make the difference for us on another level. You know, Arsenal's made it with Declan Rice this season. Manchester City, they've got Haaland. They've got a squad of good players. Haaland was a standout name.
Mm.
Liverpool at the time, it was Van Dijk. All these players have got the quality, but I think it's just pushing to that next level. This is not criticising Pierre-Emile Højbjerg as an example, because I do think has been a very good servant to Tottenham, and he's very good at Southampton. But would he be able to compete at that next level for us, going from, I suppose, top four into title contenders?
Mm. I think, as you say, marquee signings there, even just thinking of some marquee players for other clubs, for example, you've got Isaac over at Newcastle. He's a marquee player for them and he's well recognised.
Yes.
You've got Ollie Watkins then for Villa in the way that he's playing. You've got then Dominic Calvert-Lewin. They're all marquee players which you associate for these type of clubs. But when you look at it, I would suggest these three strikers would be the three strikers that Spurs should be looking at. Because, look at Isaac in the season that he's been having. Spurs know he's such a great investment. He's already played Premier League football, and they're only going to make money off him. But it's going to be tough to try and prize him away from a very oil-rich club which have the money to keep him there. So for him, he's going to go, why would I make a sideways move, for example, when I could go and sign for a Chelsea, United, and Arsenal who are looking at me, for example, or potentially I could be on for a move over to Barcelona in a few years, back to Spain, when after, Lewandowski leaves and maybe goes and plays in the Saudi or MLS, for example, I could be taking his spot and go and play out there. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I thought, has always been a perfect kind of Spurs signing. He's English. He's consistent in the Premier League. His form has dropped off over the last few years, but Everton, look at their position. I think that has a credible positioning in terms of that performance. So put him into a squad for Postecoglou to put life back into him, around the Spurs squad, into a decent club like Spurs. I think he could project himself back into the England squad. And I think, for me, it would come down to Ollie Watkins and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But again, would Watkins want to leave Villa for a Spurs? Because there's a one place difference between the two clubs at the moment. Why would you go and make that? But Spurs are a very attractive club. So if I was looking at those, they're the three I would if I was Postecoglou right now. But if you were Spurs manager, who would you be looking at, mate?
It's a hard one, because I think with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, yes, rate him as a footballer. I think he's blinding football, but you've got to keep him fit. And that's the only thing that's kept him with Everton on fringes. If it was to be able to be kept fit regularly for Everton, and obviously without this point deduction, they'd definitely be top half. With the way Dyche sets them up and that. Ollie Watkins, as you say, I think love the idea, but realistically, as you say, one place between the two teams, if they're playing Champions League football next season, he probably wouldn't. Although, being a non-admirer of Ollie Watkins. I would have said Ivan Toney once. I suppose when I say once upon a time, only not that long ago, I suppose. But if maybe fits into that dynamics of a team, I suppose, that might make it click. But realistically, again, will he want to leave if there's other clubs sniffing about, like Arsenal, like Chelsea, even being linked, I've heard. Because I'm sure Chelsea will come. They've picked up a bit of form now, haven't they? But I mean, next season, if they carry on for the way they've been playing in recent form, I know some results have been a bit hit and miss, but by and large, since that cup final, for clubs turned around, hasn't it? For results have turned around for Chelsea. So I'm telling you, yeah, Isaac. I mean, he tore us. I was going to say he tore us a new one, if I can say that.
Of course you can, mate.
Yeah, he tore us a new one when we played him in that 4-0 defeat. Would it, again, like you say, because of like Newcastle's financial situation, would he leave? Not sure. Again, I think it's that plug of Champions League football. If we have a plug of Champions League football, it might entice players to come. I mean, I'm not saying it would be the case, but there was all that talk about Kylian Mbappe and everything like that.
I
I mean,
remember that.
that would be incredible. It can't be. I don't think that'd happen for Spurs unless it was Champions League football, and Levy again would have to free up some funds to get a player of his ilk in. Other names, unless we get Harry back, you know.
You never know. I think in a few years he'll come back. I think you'll have 3-4 years at Bayern, and then he'll make a big move back to Spurs, a bit like Ronaldo did to United. And then I think you'll either stay there and retire, or I think you'll stay there and then have maybe a year or two abroad, and then he'll retire for good. Then, but I think a comeback for Kane is on the cards, and if it was come back to England. Would City look at him as a replacement for Haaland in a couple of years if he leaves, for example? Would United want to bring him in as a marquee English striker who's gone abroad and is one of the all-time top goal scorers and could break a goal-scoring record and represent United? Could be a great marketing ploy for them. Or does he come back to Spurs? It's a great place to be for Kane, but it's also a very unhappy place if you've got these offers on the table as well, considering that you could either go back to Spurs and be a legend, or you look at becoming a marquee signing for United or something like that. So I think it's definitely on the table. But as you say that, I'm thinking of the two strikers at Crystal Palace right now, and one of them that comes into mind is Eze, because he's on fantastic form, and I think he would be a fantastic signing. And I think Crystal Palace are going to be a team to watch next year, especially with the way Glasner's turned around. But if he was to step up from Palace to Spurs, I think that would be a great move for him.
I agree. I'm a huge fan of Eze, because he was at QPR before Palace, wasn't he? And yeah, just the kid's got phenomenal talent. Um, yeah, I would have him at Spurs hands down, and I'd have Elise at Spurs hands down. I mean, even as a short term, thinking of a striker, if we did get Eze or Elise or both or whatever, could that free up for opportunity for Brendan Johnson to play through for middle? Because he did it with Forest. He's still young. He does it for Wales. I like Brendan Johnson. He reminds me of a younger version of Aaron Lennon when he used to play for Spurs. Pacey, used to like take on people. He's got skill. But it's just that end product. But again, I'm sure for more games that he gets and that, he'll flourish.
I think so. I've always liked Brennan Johnson, and when he made that move to Spurs, I thought it was a great move for him, especially to step up into that high quality squad and to try and step up a little bit more, just to favour him, a bit like Ramsey did when he came from Cardiff. And I know that he was in the Premier League with Forest, but to still be there in another Premier League club who's at a higher stature. It's a bit like Daniel James. He went to United and it didn't work out for him. Now he's dropped back to the Championship. Brendan Johnson's stepped up in the Premier League, but a step that's not too high for him. And for him, whether he underperforms, the next move for him is going to be in and around the Premier League. So I think he does have a good career ahead of him. Is he going to be a world beater? I don't think so. But he's a perfect squad player. And even as I said, Daniel James then, I think he'd make a perfect squad player for Spurs. So, you've gone out and tried to have many marquee signings before, it didn't work out. But slotting players in like Brendan Johnson, like your Daniel Jameses, that's what is going to build the squad that Spurs need. And I think Chelsea need at the moment. And even United to an extent of how you bring those players in. So, for me, when I even say that, I consider James Ward Prowse, how he's only ever been at Southampton and then West Ham and then never moved. I think he'd be an excellent signing for Spurs. I
I
think
totally
he's
agree.
better than Maddison, for example, but I think he's a Maddison type of player. I think he'd be great for Arsenal to slot in. I think he'd be a good Chelsea player, a good City. Wouldn't get as much time at City, but maybe then United. So for him to be at West Ham, I think they've got like another Declan Rice, essentially. I know he's a lot older now, Ward Prowse, but he is essentially that sort of catalyst player who could project up if he was recognised for it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, James Ward-Prowse, maybe, just maybe, because he knows how to take a good corner, he could actually help our defenders defend corners better from corner practices and training.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
But yeah, I agree. I think even with the Euros, I think Southgate's got to consider Ward-Prowse.
Mm,
Because Ward-Prowse and Bowen, even Jared Bowen, I don't think he would leave West Ham realistically,
mm,
because of being for rivalry with Spurs. But because he can play out wide and he can play through the middle, he's like that Brennan Johnson sort of ilk, that is versatile. So even I wouldn't be against considering for going for Jared Bowen if that was on the cards. Like,
mm. I think again, as I was saying, West Ham. I thought of Jared Bowen because good English player. I think he could have a good step up. And I think Michael Antonio is a bit sort of past it now a little bit, but he was sort of on those lines from moving on from West Ham a few years ago, but he's ended up staying with the club. So whether Jared Bowen does the same or whether he actually sees an opportunity like Rice has and goes, yeah, I've been committed for a few years and now it's time to move on. I think that's interesting, but it also gives consideration to that Euro squad, which is going to be such a great place to be as Southgate, but also the worst place to be to cut out from that squad. And especially if you don't have that success, is again that golden generation question, because you look at the quality that never achieved anything, then he's only going to be branded as the man who didn't bring success, despite looking at 2-3 squads of players that we could have actually fielded for the Euros. But I think that's going to be another episode which I've got planned for us coming up in the next few weeks,
look
mate.
forward
But
to it. Yeah.
I think that's going to be a great episode, especially with some of the ideas I've got. But just looking at the Premier League table now, mate, if we look at this is the latest from today, which I pulled. So we got 1 point between Arsenal and City, 2 games in hand. So it's definitely going to be down to how these perform now. Liverpool aren't winning the Premier League, but they're very much firmly cemented in third place. And as we were just speaking about, it's between Spurs and Villa, which is going to be that battle between where they finish off for the Champions League qualification. And then you have Chelsea and Newcastle battling between and behind them. So I believe that Spurs are in a good position, but those two teams could catch up and cause a bit of an issue. So it's definitely going to be an interesting end of the season between, the top 8, for example, and how that's looking. So for you, if I was to give you a wagering bet, who were you putting your money on, Arsenal or City?
I'm gonna go. No, it's painful to say. I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to say Arsenal.
Mm.
Because they've been a more consistent team, I think, over the season. I mean, it depends. Yes, it does depend on tonight's game. What could have the outcome from it? However, City always have a bit of a struggling time when they come to Tottenham's ground over the last few years with Pep. Um, will the pressure get to City too much? I don't know. Um, I mean, don't get me wrong, Pep gets them organised and everything like that, and obviously he's a world-class manager, but I mean, as I say, with Arsenal just being the most consistent, I mean, defensively, they've been absolutely sound these last few months. And they're just scoring goals for fun. I mean, people coming into the team, sorry, like Leonardo Trossard, that's coming in and chipping in with vital goals. So yeah, I'll go with Arsenal as my bet.
Mm. I think, even as a Chelsea fan, looking at that rivalry between Chelsea and Arsenal, and then considering the fact that you're Spurs and Arsenal, would I want to see Arsenal win it to some extent? Not particularly. Would I be happy to see them, considering the way that they've built and, everything that they've overcome, and they got good stability, they got good players in? A little bit of me wants to say yes, just so we break that City sort of winning streak at the moment. But I would much prefer to see City win it over Arsenal, especially as a Chelsea fan, for example.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I'd rather City win it if they can. But I mean, this is a question that I'm going to put to you here, actually, Luca.
Yeah, go on then, mate. I love that.
But with this, bearing in mind, so just say City lose tonight and it's in Arsenal's hands to go on with the title for Sunday, and Arsenal do end up winning the title. Wouldn't that mean that Pep's only won like one trophy this season or something? And
I think
would he be under pressure because he's not bought
uh,
any bit of silverware?
I don't think you'd be under any pressure, mate. I think right now, if I'm considering the future, I think that City, considering the fact that he's been there something like 7 or 8 years now, and I think it's that sort of squeaky bum time where if he goes, who is the next best manager to take over? So would they go and consider Arteta to take over? Would they go and consider Xavi? Would they consider Unai Emery, for example? So these are some of the standout managers which I'd be looking at for the next, City job. Unai follows them from Pep Guardiola, the Spanish. They play a very good brand of football. Unai's proved himself with not having a budget. He's been successful in Europe. He's won a league title with PSG. Can he go and do it with City? So Unai is the perfect man for City. So I don't think Pep Guardiola is under pressure, because when we think of world-class managers, he is an absolutely world-class manager and he's up there with Klopp. I don't think Arteta is a world-class manager. I don't think Pochettino's world-class. I don't think
Mm.
Ten Hag is world-class. I don't think Eddie Howe is. I don't think Postecoglou is. I think they're all top managers, but I don't think they're world-class. So Xavi's a good manager, but is he world class? I think the only other world class manager then you've got is Carlo Ancelotti, Diego Simeone. Simeone's too defensive for City, so would City go for
Mm.
him? Probably not. So I don't think there's any pressure there. I think they want to hang on to him as much as possible. So, but he still won another trophy this year. Whereas you look at, Klopp. Klopp's leaving with nothing this year. He was on for, the domestic title. He was on for a cup, European Cup. And all he leaves with is a Champions League qualification in third, being branded behind Pep Guardiola again. So, he is a legend. And as a Chelsea fan, if
Mm.
someone said, could I have him as Chelsea manager next year? I'd be yes straight away. Such a big fan of his. But at the end of the day, when you look at it on stats in years to come, you don't remember these sort of good moments as much as you remember where he finished in the table. And that was winning less Premier Leagues than Guardiola, essentially. So, I think he's firmly cemented Guardiola, and I think him leaving, whenever that'll be, will be on his terms and not City looking to get rid of him. So, another one would be Simone Inzaghi, but he's just signed a contract extension at Inter. So I just think City have who they want at the moment, and I think for them to keep Guardiola for the next couple of years at least gives Unai a chance to see out a bit of his contract at Villa, and then potentially be the man to replace Guardiola. That's how I see it in my mind, anyway.
Mm.
So that's my response to your question, mate.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, I think even with Klopp, I mean, you're saying that he's not going to go out with a trophy. Well, one trophy, isn't it? Carabao Cup, sorry.
Hmm.
But I think with Carabao Cup, I mean, what else has Klopp won at Liverpool? He won for Champions League against us, which I remember, and he won the league title. But has he won any other trophies? Can't remember.
I'm not sure if he's won a Community Shield, I think, off the top of my head, but yeah, he's got he's obviously changed Liverpool. He's changed that dynamic, that culture. He's
Oh,
won a Premier League,
absolutely.
Champions League. But when you look at his comparison, even if you take a selection of time from Guardiola and match it against Klopp's, so they're even, Guardiola is still streets ahead of him. So it's a very unfortunate position to be in for Klopp.
Yes. No, I agree. Totally agree.
So just branding down towards the bottom end of the table in this great discussion. Obviously, we've seen that Nottingham Forest have appointed or did appoint and then is now left Mark Clattenburg as the referees officer, which was a very controversial and strange move. And I believe that there is an exclusive interview coming out today with the Forest owner on Daily Mail. If I was correct, as I saw on Twitter yesterday. But Luton Town, I think they've had a good season considering. Again, they're still up with a chance, I believe. Oh, well, not really. I think they're relegated. But I think if we look at Sheffield United, there is a big consideration here that I wanted to talk about. And that is whether they made the right move to sack Paul Heckingbottom and appoint Chris Wilder. And also whether Burnley keeping Vincent Kompany in charge for the Championship next year is a good move in your mind?
Oh, oh. um, Sheffield United were bringing Chris Wilder back. I have to say, with Paul Heckingbottom, he was giving out some strange vibes in press conferences, wasn't he? When he was
Mm,
under pressure. However, with Chris Wilder going back, I know, don't get me wrong, I can't knock him in a sense because he was one that originally got Sheffield United through the leagues back to the Premiership and everything like that, and club's close to his heart and that. But when that was announced, I was thinking, what on earth's going on there? Like, it's just like the chairman's got Wilder's number up from speed dial and saying, "Oh, fancy coming back,"
mm,
because they didn't know who else to get because A, they didn't know who to get, or B, they just felt that they needed to get the fans on side again because of Wilder's strong connection.
mm.
Um, but yeah, it is strange. I mean, there's managers that I suppose there is managers out there like that's got proven records of keeping teams up, apart from the last team that he was with, Sam Allardyce with Leeds. I think that's the only team he, um, you know, took him down sadly. But would that have been the right fit for Sheffield United? I don't know. I mean, again, 101 goals conceded this season
Mm.
in top flight football. I mean, you associate that in some ways with Sunday League football, don't you?
Absolutely, mate. Even if you look at that there, right, only 7 out of 20 clubs have a positive goal difference. One of the clubs in the negative includes Manchester United. So I think that just shows the current rate of the Premier League and where they're at. And, it almost doubles between 8th place and 20th place. So there's 12 place difference, but it almost doubles in terms of the goals conceded by a club at the bottom. And I think that just shows the difference. But if we just talk about Paul Heckingbottom, for example, a man who was sacked after winning them the championship last year and bringing them back up, a record of 14 games with only 1 win, 2 draws, 11 losses, accumulating 5 points in the process, sat bottom of the table. So as you said, they brought Chris Wilder back. Chris Wilder has had more games in charge, so currently 23 games. He's only won 1 more game than Paul Heckingbottom. He's drawn 3 more than Paul Heckingbottom. He's lost 5 more, though, and has only accumulated a 6-point difference since he's taken over. So he's picked up 11 points, but they still remain 20th. So when we look at it, and there's only that 1 game win between them, there is only 3 more draws, and Wilder's record is slightly better. On that analysis of it, it's still in a position where, for me, I would have stuck with Paul Heckingbottom over Chris Wilder in the same contrast as Burnley have stuck with Company for the next championship season.
What I'm going to use a pun. What a Wilder accusation! I'm joking.
I love that,
Uh,
mate.
but seriously, I think, yeah, Heckingbottom. I mean, I, I just don't know because even surely they're going to have whoever they get in next season, whether Wilder stays or not. Even if they kept with that squad, you've got to change it surely because the
Mm.
morale will be so low. And if they are really serious that they want to try and come back and get up again first time around, I think they're going to be in for a bit of a harsh reality again.
I think it's a bit
Because
like Norwich. Norwich were so used to winning the league coming back up, but they've been in that sort of similar position this year with David Wagner, where they haven't been used to sitting top of the table and coming back up. So I think, as you say there, Sheffield will be in that same position next year.
and I think the championship is getting more competitive now. There's more money in the championship now than there used to be as well. I mean, even with teams like Plymouth Argyle that's come up this season, yes, they stayed up on the final day of the season, but for clubs like that, in some ways, if they're playing a club like of a Sheffield United or Southampton or um, Burnley, even that's just come down this season, it's their cup final because it's very rare that they've had an opportunity to play teams of that ilk, of that stature. Um, but that's what makes football so great, isn't it? That anyone can beat anyone on the day. And even with what you're saying with Vincent Company, I mean, we're having a joke about it at home because my GP is actually a Burnley fan, and we've been talking about it quite a lot recently, like at the end of consultations. And he said to me, I don't think we're going to stay up. But the joke that's going around at the moment we're saying at home is, well, because we've relegated him on Saturday, that he's going to take me off his books and I'll be under someone else. Because he knows that I'm a Spurs fan. But he was just saying to me that with company, he don't feel that there's fault with company. And that's great to hear that from, again, because I don't really know of many Burnley fans anyway. Um, but I think, yes, continuity isn't a bad thing. But what I think was Burnley's downfall this season is at the start of the season, they just had that influx of bringing new players in and didn't really give many of the players that had gotten promotion a chance. Next season, again, what will they do? Will they have an overhaul? Will they keep with the same squad? I mean, I think quite a few of their players that came up gone out on loan. So even if they come back, they'll be like, well, why didn't we give them the opportunity then, Gaffer?
Mm.
Like, and then that puts a bit of pressure on company as well, doesn't it?
I think there will be pressure on him. I think if he doesn't, get them performing the way he did in the Championship, I think they'll get rid of him. But I think if he does come back up, then I think if they start struggling, he'll be sacked instantly for them to go, well, actually, let's look at what Bournemouth did a few years ago and ended up bringing in Gary O'Neill. He ended up having a fantastic season, and perhaps that's something that we need to do in that same sort of breath as well. So, I was having this conversation with my friend the other week in a pub, and a former professional footballer, Byron Anthony, happened to be there at the same time. And I was talking about Gary O'Neill and how he's been such a fantastic manager for Wolverhampton this year, and how he done well at Bournemouth and was unfortunate to keep his job. And my friend's like, Gary O'Neill, he's a bang average manager. I say he's far from bang average. I said his record looks like that, and I'm all for data and all that. But when you look at what he's done over the last 2 years, it's only his second season in charge in Premier League football, mind, and he's taken over a Wolverhampton squad who are currently sat 13th on that table. Yes, okay, Everton have had a points deduction; they would potentially be 14th, but for him to not be in a relegation battle for a second year in a row, in a comfortable position at this time at the end of the season. He's accumulated a very a good position where he scored a good amount of goals and only conceded minus 13, and is up and around there between your Bournemouth, your West Ham, and how they've conceded. He's done a good job, and I put him on a long list of future England managers. But right now, I think he's done an excellent job, Gary O'Neill. And I think he's definitely a good shout out when it comes to managers that we're mentioning here.
I totally agree, and I think as well, like you say, harshly got done at Bournemouth.
Mm.
Um, with Wolves, yeah, I think he's even got them to an FA Cup. Was it quarter final this year when they lost to Coventry?
Yeah.
So again, that's some achievement in itself. To get to an FA Cup quarter final in your first season in charge of a club because it was Lopetegui, wasn't it, that resigned just before the season started. So to inherit that squad with really not having a full pre-season behind you, knowing what your players entail, credit has to give to a lot of credit has to go to Gary O'Neill for that.
Mm. I absolutely agree with you there. But moving on naturally there, unfortunate to keep on, not to be kept on at Bournemouth. They obviously went on and appointed a roller, and he didn't start off the season in a great position. They were sat towards the bottom of the table. The team weren't performing well. And then for him to have kept the job and be given the time to then lift them up to 11th, they had that good win of United a few weeks back. Again, their goal difference is only minus 12. They're joint on points with Brighton there. They're 2 points ahead of Crystal Palace and Wolves. They're 4 points ahead of Fulham with Marco Silva. And they're only a few points off West Ham, essentially. So they're up and around it, Bournemouth. And I think Arola is a good manager. And I think what he's done is built those good foundations. But I would put him in the same bracket as De Zerbi. I don't think he's top end management of the Premier League. I don't think he's the worst, but I think he's a good performer who could perhaps catch an eye of someone else in the Premier League. So if, say, Unai Emery went to City in a few years, would then Arola be a perfect replacement at Villa for a natural progression? So he is in that position, and I think that he has done a good job considering. So it's a good position for Bournemouth to be in.
I think Arola as well has only just recently signed a new deal with Bournemouth, hasn't he? New 3-year deal or something. But yeah, credit where it's due. I mean, he's getting slanky firing. Again, I don't think they've brought players in, but by and large, they've had the same sort of squad, if I'm right, that was inherited. And yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to see that. How many points are they on? My guys, is that 48 points?
Yes, 48 points for Bournemouth.
Yeah, I mean, they still could finish top half come end of final play on Sunday. Um, all right, yeah, Brighton still got game in hand on them, but that's that'd be a testament to Arola in his first season in the Premiership.
Absolutely, and I think even then, when people argue, Gary O'Neill should have been kept on by Bournemouth. If they can finish top 10 and higher than Gary O'Neill's side, a lot of people are going to go, well, actually, it's a good progressive move to appoint a roller because of the work that he's done compared to Gary O'Neill so far. But just to add us in there naturally, so we got Irola. He's currently contender for manager of the season in terms of the work that he's just done. So he currently has 13 wins, 9 draws, 14 losses, with 52 goals scored and a minus 11 goal difference. But they're currently contending for 10th, as you said, after they finished 15th last year, and they've currently done well. The other manager contending against him is Mikel Arteta. So he's looking to win the first Premier League title in 20 years and has recently just set a new record with Arsenal, creating history. And he currently possesses the best attacking and defensive records, scoring 88 goals this year with only 28 conceded. And they're on very good form at the moment. Such good form, and I think as we said earlier on, he's done such a remarkable job, especially for someone who's never managed before. The third contender there is the legendary Jurgen Klopp. So 23 wins in 36 games for him so far, with 9 draws, 4 losses, 81 goals scored, so less than Arteta's. Conceded more than Arteta, but 43 goal difference for him. And they're going to look like they're finishing third. The fourth contender there, Unai Emery, for me, which is my shout. 20 wins, 7 draws, 9 losses. He has scored 73, conceded 53, though, unfortunately. Europa League, Conference League qualification for this year, and is currently contending for Champions League football with success over City, 2 victories over Arsenal, a draw against Liverpool last night. And then we have Pep Guardiola again, who's always up there, but only 3 losses in 35 games so far, with 87 scored, 54 goal difference. So 5 managers there contending for the title for manager of the season. Who is your money on for manager of the season rather than the obvious Pep Guardiola?
It's got to go to Unai Emery. I'm with you on that. Again, Europa Conference League semi-finalist as well. Again, it's some minor tweaks to the squad. He's brought in some of his own players and that, but they've just come on another level since Dean Smith was there. Dean Smith built foundations, and now Unai Emery has taken them and just gone 10 times stronger. And yeah, if they can get it right this summer, they could be. I mean, they was even in for title running at one point, wasn't they? Because they were so close to one another.
Literally a few off.
Yeah, so I think they've got. Yeah, a lot of clubs have got to be wary of Villa.
I think so, mate, and I think they need marquee signings. I think one good defender, another midfielder, a good striker to support Ollie Watkins. I think they can build a good squad, and especially on next season, because 4th place, Unai Emery. For me, I've followed him ever since Seville, and I think he's always been such a great manager. I never understood why PSG sacked him. I'm not sure why he turned down that Newcastle job, but for him to come into Villa and have them performing, especially in terms of the squad he inherited over Gerrard, for him to be contending, as you said, for that Premier League title, to be qualifying for potentially Champions League football, he's done such an incredible job. So for me, he's my manager of the season. I think he's not the obvious man between Arteta and Guardiola. I think if Arsenal win it, Arteta will win it. But I think if Guardiola goes on to win it, then I think it has to go to Unai, just simply because of the work that he's done, considering the budget as well. So I think he's such a great shout. But to move on to a little bit of the last point, What's your thoughts on West Ham sacking David Moyes? Again, referring back to the Premier League table that we have, they're in a good position in ninth. They could obviously, drop out of the top 10, but they've done well in a European run. They won a European Cup last year. Good stability, only minus 12 on goal difference, 2 points off United, 3 points off 5 points off Chelsea, and Newcastle United. So, picks up 5 more points. He's potentially up to 6th. So, what, considering that Lopetegui left Wolves, and there's not a lot of positivity surrounding him coming in, what's your thoughts on West Ham moving on from Moyes?
I think, again, it's sitting in the middle with it. I think West Ham, they got to that European Cup final last season. They won it, and that'll be cherished for a lot of West Ham fans in their hearts, in their recent history, for what he did there. And I think by and large, with what resources again he's had at West Ham, I think Moyes has got to be praised. But I think because he had that first spell and now he's been back for this second spell and he's been there for some time now, I think maybe it's time to freshen it up a little. If they're really wanting to compete with getting, I'm not saying that Moyes is incapable or anything like that with the likes of Kudos and that, but you need to, again, if you want to hit that next height, if they want to go from Conference League then into Europa League on a consistent basis, and then that foundation to build potentially to other opportunities, then they need that someone that's got that sort of European ilk behind them, like European experience ilk behind them on a consistent basis. And I'm not dissing that with Moyes because he has done that quite regular with West Ham. But I think with how football has changed, the dynamics of football have changed. Football hasn't changed. Football has changed with attacking football, open, expensive football, pressing from front now. Unfortunately, with Moyes, he's still with the, I can't say older approach, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And maybe again, it might be that Lopetegui comes in, does exactly the same as what Moyes has done. It might be, on the other hand, that Lopetegui takes them to different heights. It could be, on the other hand, that we come back and we think, oh, blimey, Moyes did actually a really good job with West Ham and people didn't give him enough credit for what he deserved.
Because obviously he got sacked and was brought back. And as you were speaking there, if Lopetegui doesn't perform and say he's finding himself sitting 16th, 17th towards the Premier League table after, say, 13, 14, 15 games potentially, West Ham might turn around and sack him very quickly. But would you put a potential third return for David Moyes on the cards? Or if you were to look at another Premier League team for Moyes, where would you see him potentially go in?
That's a very good question. I don't think it would be, well, the only reason it'd be a third spell for Moyes at West Ham is when I say they need to keep their reputation in stake, what I mean is if they're wanting to keep him for top flight and it just goes pear-shaped, then he's your man, really. But if, with the top flight teams, I can't see really who he could fit in with there as such, apart from maybe Forest. Um, but it's a really tough call on that, and I think, but really, what we're saying about with Sheffield United earlier, I mean, he probably wouldn't want to go down to the Championship Moisey, but that's the sort of person that they maybe should look at if they wasn't going to keep with Wilder, because he's got the experience. He knows certain players, like, I'm not saying Aaron Creswell as such, but people of them experienced ilk players that can help them get where they need and to bring that stability back to the club. He could be the man for Sheffield United.
He certainly could be, and just as you say that there, I think I consider, him branding himself in the same sort of way as Sam Allardyce. So obviously, you had Sam Allardyce, you had Neil Warnock, you have those type of managers which sort of get reprised in the roles to keep teams up. And unfortunately for It was good in a way because Sam Allardyce went down to the Championship, brought him back up, proved that he could do it down at the lower league, and stayed with West Ham and had a good time there. But then branded himself in an unfortunate way towards the end of his career, where he got relegated and never had that, and ended up with 2 relegations. Would Moyes want to brand himself in the same sort of brush as what Sam Allardyce did, and then Roy Hodgson ended up doing by being relegated with West Brom? He can always say that he's never been relegated, that he's still a Premier League manager. Again, Roy Hodgson and has come back to the Premier League earlier this year. Sam Allardyce has had Premier League opportunities. They're both very successful managers, in contrast to Moisey. So would Moisey want to drop down? Would he want to put himself in the same brush, or would he just want to keep above those in terms of that sort of that sort of dynamic and that perspective of things? Because one team that I really like and who have been, I think, struggling this year and have had a little bit of luck by Nottingham Forest, I believe, being deducted points as well, is Thomas Frank over at Brentford. I'm a huge fan of his, but if you look at it, nice big 10-point difference between 16th and 17th for him, but they are just in touching distance of a relegation battle. So if they continue to struggle next year and Forest perhaps challenge, you have a good Leicester side coming back, you have a good Ipswich side, and then obviously the third team is to be confirmed. But if these sides are up there and challenging, Brentford could be in for a relegation battle next year. They could be a team that end up sacking Thomas Frank, despite as much as we'd like him because he is a good manager. Could they be the type of club to go for a Moisey and give them stability as such? But I think it'd be a shame to see Thomas Frank be sacked, because he has been such a good manager for Brentford. I would see him potentially at Everton. I think he is a nice suit for that. Plays good football, good appointment. Whether West Ham would go for him then, whether Brighton, and whether De Zerbi moves on. So I think Thomas Frank has options in the future if Brentford were to sack him. But I think he's definitely a manager to keep an eye on. So interesting times for the year ahead.
I agree, and I think he'll be again. He could be a man severely under pressure because, again, unfortunately, it's not the players as such, but it's managers that get for sacked for it. But if Ivan Toney was to leave again this summer, how do you replace someone of Ivan Toney's ilk in a Brentford side? Burnbow's good, Wissa's good, but they're not at a Tony level.
I agree. I think Tony is such a good player, but I don't think he's at the same level. But Jordan, the whole point of these episodes is something that I wanted to bring in a new series, essentially, but it just meant that we could talk all things football naturally. And there's so many episodes which I got planned for us and so many different ideas. So I'm glad that you've come on tonight, but you're making this happen, which I really appreciate because I love spending time with you, mate, honestly, and just chatting and catching up with you and just essentially bringing a podcast episode through a love of football and a friendship is what this series is all about for me. So I appreciate it, especially on a Tuesday night, for example. But it's 8 minutes into the Spurs and City game. But whilst I want to let you go for that because it's a big game for you as a fan, mate. These episodes were supposed to be half an hour snapshots. But mate, an hour has flown by chatting to you, and I've loved all things football with you. So it's been
It's
a
been
great
a pleasure,
hour.
Luke. And thank you for having me on, and thank you for getting me to do these with you because I've really enjoyed tonight, and I'm looking forward to the next instalments.
Oh, plenty to
of
come,
the
mate.
road.
I'm already planning the full caliber of episodes to come. So I think it's definitely going to be a good one to come. And we got 2 episodes recording next week, which I'm really excited about, having 2 different types of series for you to be on next week, mate. So I'm really looking forward to spending more time with you.
Thank you, Angie, my friend. I'm really looking forward to it as well, and I'm it's going to be interesting what next week's going to bring with all this title running and everything like that. We'll either be coming on here thinking, "Oh, Arsenal's won it," ooh, or ooh.
Absolutely, mate. So your money's on Arsenal, mine's on City. So we got a bit of a head-to-head gridlock on that. So who it comes down to, we'll catch up in the next episode. But I'm looking forward to it. So, mate, I'll
Fantastic.
catch up with you shortly. But I appreciate the recording of this first episode of the Weekly Digest with you.
Top man, thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed it.
I'm glad, mate. Pleasure.